This like drove me across the Atlantic.
So, welcome to the National Museums of Scotland. I'm sure you have probably all made a visit here at least once. And this is it. The section I am most concerned with is in this side of the building here, the new purpose-built building. Well, I say new. It was built for the new millennium in the late 1990s. And essentially the National Museum of Scotland, I think, really embodies so much of what I've been trying to get out with this tour. Essentially, when it comes to talking about the issues we've been talking about, they don't do it. It is not in there. If you were somebody of the basically over 2 million people a year, predominantly British, visit the National Museum of Scotland, they do not get to know about Scotland's role in things like the slave trade in India and across the colonies. Essentially, this for me is what's contributing towards a huge problem. We were having a lovely discussion earlier about identity, and I think that something in Scotland that I've always really struggled with, being somebody who's born and raised in Scotland but has Indian heritage, is something that I've struggled with, is the idea that people will be horrible to you. And yet a phrase that I've experienced in Scotland many, many times is there's no racism here. I've had it said to my face on multiple occasions by somebody who I've then gone on to her here being racist. It's a wonderful irony of the world. But I think that concept and that dialogue of saying there's no problem, there's no racism here, there was a good book of the same title that I have not yet read, published recently, is tied or is actually caught up in the same historical amnesia of not acknowledging the past. And I think they're very much connected. And the National Museum, what should be the space for people to go and learn? Not everybody is going to go study history at university. Goodness, they should not. Definitely not. But if they choose to, great. But of course they're not going to do that. Not everybody is going to sit and bore themselves with documentaries that they're not interested in. Not everybody is going to... Nobody gets taught this in schools. I was not taught this in schools, and I'm sure many of you were not either. So this is sort of the big public space where people should get to learn about this, to at least appreciate and understand it. And here are the 3 plaques in the whole museum, this giant museum with an entire section on Scotland, the rise of Scotland and how wonderful Scotland is. 3 plaques dedicated to the conversations we have been having today. So, on Africa. This is what in the early modern period in Scotland and the world, which the section is called, this is what the plaque has to say on Africa. The Scottish experience of Africa in the 19th century centred on missionaries and explorers. The best known was David Livingstone, but others were just as influential. Service in Africa offered up opportunities for women as missionaries, such as Mary Slessor, and in medical work and education. It goes on with some very benign things about how they were also soldiers. That's it. There is no mention of the slave trade or slavery. There is, however, if you do some digging and look around. I was looking for it this morning because I realised I'd forgotten to photograph it to note down the quote. I looked very hard and found on a slide that says on reasons for leaving. At the very bottom of reasons for leaving, so very much again the bottom of the pile, not the important bit. There were many other factors that weren't as important, that were more important than this. The role of Scots in the slavery system as owners and managers of plantations in the Caribbean is clear. People from all classes across Scotland went to the Sugar Islands in hope of making money. Some returned with vast fortunes made from slave-based economies. Many owners of slave plantations did not live in the Caribbean. The profits were invested into Scottish estates to buy luxury goods. Which, on the face of it, actually sounds quite good, if you ask me. This is one paragraph in the entire museum, surrounded by plaque after plaque after plaque after plaque of how we did it by ourselves. How Scotland made itself great. How Scotland made itself prosperous. One paragraph in the context and a myriad of so many others. For me, it's not satisfactory. Everyone else can make their own minds up, but that's sort of where it comes across from me. And finally, for me, the most shocking of the 3 plaques on India and the East. So at least with the slave trade, there is some sort of acknowledgement as to the role played by Scots in it and the successes that brought. The objects displayed here remind us of the varieties of roles which Scots played in India as soldiers, administrators and traders. Now, one of these objects is in fact a medal given to somebody serving in the Indian Mutiny, and that is what it is called on the plaque on the inside. It is called the Indian Mutiny, despite the fact that it's not widely accepted in historical circles today. But that's what it says there. Following on, by the mid-18th century, Scots were influential in the East India Company. originally chartered in 1601 to pursue Oriental trade. Note trade is the key word. Building on kinship and a strong sense of identity, the Scots did well out of service in India. It provided openings for many, especially the sons of upper middle class families. The successes prompted Sir Walter Scott, I told you I'd find him, Sir Walter Scott to describe India as the corn chest of Scotland. In the 19th century, Scots rose to prominence in a range of professions, including medicine, engineering and education. Scottish exports to India included the necessary finance and expertise to develop. Develop is the word used, the Indian economy. Right to 1914 and beyond, the Scots held some of the highest offices in the Raj. There is no mention of extortion. There is no mention of oppression. There is no mention of the fact that raw materials were shipped over from India to build Scottish cities like Dundee and Glasgow. Dundee is known as the Duke City. Duke does not come from Scotland. Paisley pattern, very famous. Some of you are donning it with lovely scarves, and I love and adore Paisley pattern. Paisley pattern does not come from Paisley. Paisley pattern comes from India. I'm not saying that we need to rename it or rechange it, but at least some sort of acknowledgement as to where it comes from, as to how it got here, would be lovely. I absolutely think so. Hello, sorry, will we part like the Red Sea for this lovely lady? Great Red Sea impression, everyone. Moses would be proud. Now, so these words are so important, and it seems on the face of it as if it's not. But like I say, I think that this presentation of Scotland's role within the empire is very much something that allows us to say things like, we've not got a problem here, there's no problem here, we never did it in the past, that was the English. We had no role in it, we had no place or part or say. For me, that's not true. I don't think that anything I've been speaking about concerns that. This is one city and an entire nation. If we went to Glasgow, that would be a far greater conversation. The Glasgow slave merchants were the most important and wealthy in the whole of the British Empire. If we went to Dundee, again, a different conversation. Just over there is the university main campus. I have not been able to get much out of the university, but that is because the university have done no research into their ties with slavery. It was announced in the news this morning that Cambridge would be doing research, and Glasgow, to their credit, Glasgow University have already published a report on Glasgow's ties to the slave trade. They were huge, in long story short. But this was a tour of Edinburgh. What I hoped to do today was to try and bring out how different iconic landmarks of Edinburgh can be linked to imperialism and can be linked to India and the slave trade. Very much, I have not been able to go into anything like as much detail or depth as I would have loved. I appreciate people have finite attention spans, and I do have a finite voice as well. This is something that perhaps belongs in a book, but something with a book is not everybody likes reading books. So I hoped that doing a tour would be a way of bringing it out. As I say, there's already a slavery walk in Edinburgh. This is 2 slavery walks in a country. There are goodness knows how many tours throughout Scotland doing different things. There are Outlander tours, Braveheart tours, all kinds of tours. And yet this is now potentially, if there were to be more, one of 2. So the long story short is that I hope you very much enjoyed the tour, and I hope that it has been informative and hopefully made you see the city differently. I'm very much doing this as a preview, and I will in no way be asking for any. I'm not doing one of those tours that was like, pay what you want, please. Don't worry, it's not that in the slightest. The only thing that I would ask, if you feel like it, is on the Facebook event, if you would like to comment any form of feedback, it would be very helpful for my write-up and reports and make it a lot richer. If you don't want to, that's absolutely fine as well. If you prefer to email, I can absolutely get your email off you and send you an email too. Aside from that, I do hope you've enjoyed it. I very much don't think it has been perfect, but I hope that I will learn a lot and take a lot from this. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for coming, and I do hope you have a wonderful evening. Thank you again. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Yeah, have a nice evening.